And welcome back to Flying with Overkill F-18C Hornet. Today we're going to look at landing the aircraft. Now, there's a few things to get into with landing the aircraft that can be kind of confusing, so I'm going to do my best to explain everything in as layman's terms as possible at a very high level of detail, meaning I'm not going to go real crazy into the details and depths of it because I don't want to confuse anybody any more than some of this can already be. So the first thing that we want to do is, as a new pilot to the F-18, give yourself a lot of room to set up your landing. And first recommendation actually is do not try to start out with the carrier. Okay, the carrier is a pain in the butt all on its own. It's a whole beast of its own. So do not try to start out with the carrier. Learn to understand the instruments and the controls and how to fly the E-bracket and things of that nature first. And then worry about moving on to the carrier when you decide to be a little bit brave. Okay. So what we're going to do first is, I've gotten us about 15-16 miles away from the airfield. And how we're going to tell that here is your starting point is always going to be waypoint 0 unless you started from the air. But if you started from the ground like we did, we started from Kobuleti, and I'm just going to reduce my distance here. We'd always be waypoint 0, and how we can get our distance is by, you can see it right here on the top, we got 19 miles out right now at 248 degrees bearing, but we can hit waypoint and it gives us a little indicator up here on our HUD, and we get our distance down here. Okay, so that's the first thing I'm going to do. And if we zoom way the hell out there, you guys can see it. There's our airfield right there. Okay, so I'm going to keep sort of flying on a cross course here. It's not quite ready to turn onto the airfield. So we're about 5,000 feet barometric. We're about 15 miles out, 16 miles out. And I'm going to pause the sim so we can go over a couple of things. Okay, I'm actually going to lock our camera too because it gets annoying. The first thing I want to talk to you guys about is angle of attack, which is this guy right here. Our current angle of attack is 3.6 degrees. Now, what is angle of attack? The easiest way, and this is strict, I'm speaking just to landing right now, okay? It is the nose angle in relationship to the runway, okay? And this is true for either carrier or land airfield. So if we know that the runway is a flat surface, right? Let's pretend it's perfectly flat. What the angle of attack is for example, our nose is up 3.6 degrees in relationship to the angle of the runway. So 0 degrees would mean that the nose is perfectly flat, just like the runway, two perfectly parallel lines. Our current angle of attack is 3.6 degrees. So currently our nose is high 3.6 degrees in relationship to the runway. I hope that makes sense. So take two flat lines and put your on top of each other. Take the top line and bring it up 3.6 degrees, and that's our angle of attack. Okay, now the next thing we have to be interested in here is glide slope. Okay, the glide slope, ideal glide slope for the F-18 Hornet is 3 degrees. Okay, so this line right about here, imagine a line right here. And what we want to do, and we're almost there, if you see that the threshold of the runway, let's zoom in a bit. You can see the threshold of the runway is there, so right now it's at about a 4 degree glide slope. Okay, so we need to lose altitude just a little bit to bring it up. And that's what I want you to think about too, the relationship of glide slope. So if the runway was way down here, right, the further down it is, the further we need to descend the aircraft to get the threshold of the runway back to where we need it to be. And it's not quite the threshold, it's just a good starting point. We actually want the white keys is what we're going to be aiming at, but we'll get into that in just a minute. So we need to have an 8.1 degree angle of attack and a 3 degree glide slope down to the runway. And how we know we're on that 3 degree glide slope is if our flight path indicator, this guy right here, is down here in the 3 degree line and the runway is right in the middle of it. Okay, then we're on a 3 degree glide slope. And then what we need to do is trim the nose up to 8.1 degrees. Okay, so the nose needs to come up, the flight path indicator needs to stay where it is on that 3 degree glide slope with the runway. And I'm going to show you guys what that looks like here in just a second. Okay, so I hope you guys are understanding the relationship, the difference between angle of attack and glide slope. Okay, glide slope is the actual path the aircraft is taking down to the runway, the degrees of descent to the runway. And our angle of attack is the nose's position to the run in relationship to the runway. So I really hope that makes sense, because it can be a tough concept to grasp for some people. And that's why I said give yourself a lot of distance when practicing this at first, and then as you get better and better, you get faster and faster with it, close that distance up. And give you guys a target, you want to be able to match this within about a mile and a half is the goal. Is you want to be able to make your turn at a mile and a half and bring it down and get onto the deck without an issue. Okay, and then once you master that, that's the point where you can start looking into, okay, maybe it's time to go play with the carrier. Okay, but anyway, getting back on track here. I digressed a little bit. So first recommendation, don't start with the carrier. Second recommendation, give yourself a lot of distance, 15-20 miles to start for your setup. Now let's talk about steps. At 300 knots, you want the landing gear down. You're going to continue to reduce your speed below 250 knots. Once you get below 250 knots, you're going to go full flaps. So we have landing gear down at 300, flaps down below 250, and you are going to continue to reduce your speed. Okay? And we're going to continue to reduce our speed until we get between the 180 to 150 knot range. Okay? And the reason why I'm using that as a range to sort of set as a target before we even start addressing the E-bracket is because, even a fully loaded, very heavy F-18, about 180 knots would be, you're still approaching that touchdown speed. I don't think I've ever, and I've taken a fully loaded aircraft, turned right back around, landed again, and I don't think it was 180 knots. So between 150 and 180 knots is our target. Once we get to that speed range, then we'll start addressing the E-bracket. Now, I'm going to show you guys what that looks like, okay, and then we'll talk the E-bracket once we get to that point. Now let's talk about this whole reducing the speed thing, okay. I'm going to point my nose down, my flight path indicator, down to the edge of the runway here when it comes time to turn. I'm going to keep it at that 3-degree line. Okay, now remember, if the threshold of the runway is coming down, okay, and it's below our 3-degree glide slope, I need to reduce altitude quickly to get it back into that 3-degree glide slope. Now here's what's going to happen as I start to reduce speed. As I start reducing speed, the nose is going to drop, right? That just makes, standard physics, In order to maintain a constant level path, we have to be at a certain speed based on our weight. Okay, if we start pulling that speed off, well, then we're losing the lift for our current weight, so our nose will start to drop. So what we need to do is trim the nose up. This is where trim comes into play. Trim is a huge factor in landing the Hornet. Okay, huge factor. And so we're going to have to continue to trim the nose up to maintain, to keep the flight path indicator on that 3-degree line on the runway. Okay, and I'm going to show you guys what that looks like here in just a minute. So let's go ahead and unlock our camera so I can look around without looking like a fool. I'm going to center my camera back out just a little bit. It's a little close for me. All right. And let's unpause. So we're just about on that 3-degree glide slope. So here's what I'm doing. I'm pulling off on the throttle, and I'll get the controls up for you. So I'm pulling off on the throttle. The runway's just about 3 degrees, definitely close enough where I'm comfortable saying that. I'm going to use my speed brake, as you can see there, to start slowing us down. So I'm below 300, landing gear's coming down. Okay, continuing to reduce speed. The landing gear's going to add some drag on the aircraft. There's the E-bracket, but we're ignoring it for right now. It's too soon. Now, I'm not turning directly on course with the runway yet. We're a little too off of center here, so I'm giving a little bit further. But now notice what I'm doing. I'm letting the flight path indicator fall down because I need to descend more. That the runway isn't quite on that 3-degree glide slope where I want it to be. Okay, we're getting pretty close now, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add power. And I'm going to start trimming the nose up. Okay. You know what? We're getting close enough now. Let's talk about the E-bracket. So actually, she's pretty heavy. Well, actually, hold on. Let's see what happens here. We missed one step here. So I fell below 250 knots. So now I'm going to drop my flaps to full. Okay, there we go. That's what I was expecting to see. All right. So as the flaps came down, okay, here's why the E-bracket went up. Let's just talk about the E-bracket. I need to stick to our original plan here. When the flaps came down, you saw that the E-bracket went back up. Here's why. When the flaps come down, it requires less speed to keep the aircraft in the air. Okay, it increases the lift of the wing. It also increases the drag, but it turns the aircraft into more of a kite than a streamlined bullet like we have when the flaps are up. Okay, and that's why when you're really heavy, that's why you take off with flaps. Even airliners, commercial aircraft do it. Okay, when they take off every day, you know, when you see them leave the airports wherever your hometown is, they're taking off with flaps down. Okay, and the reason for that is because it allows them to get airborne while using less engine power and less speed. Okay, so it saves on fuel. All right, and then once they get up and climbing, the flaps come up and then they start to accelerate and get to their cruising speed. So the reason why the E bracket went back up when I dropped the flaps is because it required less power for me to maintain this current glide slope and pitch angle. Now here's what the E bracket is. The E bracket is, its purpose is to get us on speed, and that's the term that we use. Okay, it lets us know that we are at the correct landing speed for the Hornet and her current weight. Okay, and I'm trying to think about how to explain this without getting confusing. The biggest thing I want you guys to realize is first the goal. The goal is to get this tail right here of the, or this wing on the flight path indicator right about here. Okay, but we don't chase it with the stick. The E bracket is based strictly on speed. Okay, if it is high, I want you guys to picture grabbing it with your hand and pulling it down just like you would the throttle. If the E bracket is low, so it's under the flight path indicator, I want you to grab it with your hand and push it forward just like you would with the throttle, maintaining your 3-degree glide slope. Okay, and what you're going to see is right now we're at a 4.8 degree angle of attack. As we get close, okay, as this starts to get closer and closer, we're going to see closer and closer to 8.1 degrees, and that's our target. Our goal is to get it right on 8.1 degrees. You don't have to be dead on perfect. What we're looking for is this guy here. We're looking for this orange donut to light up. Okay, now you can see a couple of different symbols here. This is the AOA indexer. Okay, this is what tells us, it's a visual reference just like the E bracket. Okay, so if we see here the orange donut, that means we're dead on 8.1 degrees or close enough. We're actually between 7.4 and 8.8, which is within landing parameters. The whole point, just to give you guys some further information on why we do the 8.1 degrees, okay, and why we're looking for that, is it makes sure that the tail hook is at the proper angle to hit the deck and catch the cable. Okay, so that's the whole purpose of this, is to make sure the aircraft's at the right angle that the tail hook traps the cable. So if we see an orange donut, we're dead on track right where we need to be. If we see an orange donut with a green arrow, it means we're slightly slow. Okay, which means we need to accelerate. If we see an orange donut with a red arrow, it means we're slightly fast and we need to reduce throttle. And if you see just red or just green, it means you're either, red will mean you're really fast, and just green means you're very, very slow. Okay, so to put this all back into perspective here, let me give you guys what's going to happen moving forward. So moving forward, I am now going to get ready to start steering the aircraft towards the runway. Okay, we're going to power up, or I'm going to trim up just a little bit because I need to get my flight path indicator back in line with the runway. Okay, and then I'm going to be reducing throttle because I need to bring my E bracket down. So I'm going to be continue to reduce speed. As I reduce speed, the E bracket is going to come down. But the flight path indicator, remember, if we pull speed off, the nose wants to drop. So as I'm pulling speed back to bring the E bracket down, I need to trim up to keep the nose where it is and keep the nose from dropping as I slow down the aircraft. All right, so let me show you guys this in action. All right, so there's that. All right, so we can trim it down. So I'm pulling throttle off. I'm still slowing down. Okay, and that's what I'm talking about. So now the nose is dipping, so I'm trimming up. And you can see that we're getting on speed. So as this is getting closer, look at our speed. Okay, our speed's getting right back to where it needs to be. We're approaching our landing speed, and that's why that the E bracket is now next to the flight path indicator. So we're getting close. And you can watch our AOA indexer there on the left. So we're slightly fast. Alright, so right there, that's just about our 8.1 degrees. We've got the flashing yellow-orange. So now I am almost completely hands off the stick. I'm using the stick just to control my lateral movements. If I need to descend, I'm just going to pull some power off. Okay, if I need to climb, I'm just going to add a little bit of power. Okay, so everything we're doing here is controlled with the throttle now. Okay, so we're just about on that 3-degree line. I'm going to tap my trim just a hair. There we go. So right about here is what we're looking for. Okay, this is just about, I mean, we can call it good at 8.1 degrees of angle of attack. We're just about on a 3-degree glide slope, maybe 3.5, okay, and that's still perfectly fine. And our speed, and remember I told you between 150, 180 knots to start messing with the E bracket. This is why. 156 knots, we're right where we need to be. We are on speed. This is what this configuration is called. We are on speed and ready for landing. So now it's just a matter of flying the 3-degree glide slope, and we're going to fly it all the way to the runway. If my nose starts to drop a little bit, my flight path indicator comes down a little bit, I'm not going to use the stick. I'm going to add power. Now, there's a caveat there. If your nose drops too fast, obviously pull back on the stick and keep your nose up so you don't smash into the ground. But don't lose your trim, okay? Make sure that you just sort of use the stick just enough to get back where you need to be, and then let go, set your power, and see if you need to make any adjustments to your trim. All right, so we're going to keep on going. Being real gentle. I'm actually going to come right just a little bit. We're still a little off of center here, so I'm going to sort of fly a cross course here. Okay, so I'm getting high a little bit, so now I'm pulling off the throttle a bit. Okay, I'm going to let myself descend a little bit faster until I see. What I'm doing is I'm pulling the throttle off, letting the nose dip a little bit so flight path indicator drops down until I see my target area on the runway, which we're close enough now. I'm looking for right about here is where is my touchdown point. That's where I'm looking for. Just, you know, about 50 feet inside the threshold of the runway is my goal, okay? And so when I see that in my 3-degree line here, okay, remember, picture our line right here. Once I see that, then I'm going to add power back to get the nose back to where I want it to be. So we're just about there, so I'm adding power again. You can see, and it's, if you guys look at monitor the controls over here, it's really, really light movements. Okay, really gentle, but it's constant. You're constantly on the throttle. Even more so when you're making a carrier approach. Okay, we're coming close here. We're still about 4 degrees here, so again, I'm letting it drop. I'm using the throttle, that's it. Not using the stick, I'm just using the stick to control my lateral movements. Okay, starting to get close here. Turn back on course here for the runway. Now, once I hit the ground, okay, once my main wheels touch, and I'm not going to flare. That's the other important thing to remember, is that Navy aircraft do not flare. That's why we have that big, robust landing gear. It's why it's got that huge freaking hydraulics on it and the spring-loaded freaking just beefy. I mean, look at that nose gear. They're just beefy as all hell, and this is why. Because you don't flare them. You don't have that nice glide touchdown. You just sort of plop them down onto the ground, okay? So we're not going to flare. We're going to maintain this glide slope all the way down until our wheels touch. Once our wheels touch, we're going to employ our speed brake. So we're going to let the speed brake come out, help slow us down. It also spoils any lift on the back end of the aircraft. Should help you from bouncing if you come in a little hot. Try to get on center line here. Now notice I sort of pitched down on the stick there, and the E bracket bounced, and all I did was let go of it, and it put itself back where it needed to be. Okay, we're going to come in a little cockeyed here, but that's alright. We're getting close, so I'm going to zoom back out. Alright, so I'm maintaining that 3-degree glide slope. I'm not quite where I want to be. So I'm just sort of dropping the power and then cycling it back up to get back on track. Alright, so here we go. So we're going to do sort of left side landing here. A little long on the landing, didn't quite hit my target zone. Alright, wheels down, 0 throttle, speed brake out, and on the brakes. Staying on the brakes, staying on the brakes. Light movements on the rudders to steer it, because if you notice, nose wheel steering is engaged. You can see that in the bottom right of our HUD there. And that, ladies and gentlemen, pilots, is how we land an F-18 Hornet. Go ahead and bring her off the runway here and clear the active. And we'll just pop her right here and call it a night. So guys, I really hope that made sense to you. A quick recap. First off, this is Kobuleti Airfield. If you guys want to reproduce this on your own sim, I highly recommend 15-20 miles out, you know, depending on your confidence level. If you're feeling pretty good about it, that makes sense, you know, you can definitely bring it in a little bit closer. But 15-20, definitely a good starting range. Start up at about 5,000, 4,500 feet, somewhere in that range. Looking for the threshold in that 3-degree glide slope line. Remember to below 300 knots, landing gear down. Below 250 knots, flaps down. Continue to reduce speed till you get to the 180, 150 range. Okay, don't start chasing the E bracket until your flaps are down at full and your landing gear is down. Once you get into that 180 to 150 knot range, then start worrying about the E bracket. Remember, the E bracket is nothing more than telling you what speed you need to be at. Okay, you need to maintain that 3-degree glide slope with your flight path indicator. Okay, so you're having to constantly trim up as you reduce speed. Reducing speed, the nose wants to drop, so you need to make sure you're trimming that nose up. Once you get it to the middle of the E bracket or just below, and you get your orange donut, you are on speed. Then every movement from there vertically is controlled through the throttle. Unless you get into real trouble, then obviously, like I said, yes, use the stick, pull yourself up, make sure you don't crash. But once you start powering up again and get the speed back under control, you know, let go of the stick and let the E bracket settle back where it belongs, and use the throttle to control your ascent and descent. Remember what you saw over here in the flight controls indicator here is real light movements, real gentle, but constant, back and forth, back and forth. Listen to your engines. Listen to what she's doing. The one thing about the Hornet is she does have a very definitely a slower spool up time, right? So you know, just because you put the throttle forward, then you have to give the engine a chance to respond. Once the engine responds, you need to take what you just gave it back, okay, to maintain your position. Okay, do not flare at the end. Keep it on, you know, that the piano keys is what you're looking for. Maintain your 3-degree glide slope, maintain your 8.1 degrees angle of attack, and drive the wheels all the way to the deck. As soon as your main wheels touch, speed brake out, which, let's put ours away. Speed brake out, wheel brakes on. She does take a minute to slow down, so don't panic. As you saw, it will eventually happen. She sort of, it's one of those things where it slows down slowly, 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 and all of a sudden it just comes to a screeching halt. Okay, gentle on the rudders as you're coming in. She is one that will tip, and you can scratch or take out the wing tips and things of that nature. Any questions or comments, please leave them in the field below, guys. I'll be happy to answer. I'll be happy to readdress this in the future. If you guys need me to, please don't hesitate to ask questions. I have no problem going through this again if I need to. Alright, and let me know what you guys thought. I hope you guys hit that like and subscribe button. I'd love to have you back on the channel again. Hit that bell for future content notification. There's more for the Hornet coming, and it's going to be coming pretty quick. Have a great week, guys. Happy New Year if I don't see you guys before then. Take care.